Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. So I'm Paul Empringham, and today I'm going to run through a webinar on how to prevent engineering license checkout abuse. So just to run through the agenda, we're going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. We're going to introduce the company, Team EDA, and our product. We're going to talk about what checkout abuse actually is in relation to engineering licenses. Just some of the examples of how users are actually keeping a hold of these licenses. Then really the crux of it, why does this matter? Then we're going to look through how Lamum, our solution, actually addresses these checkout abuses, demonstrating that as we go through, and I'll take some questions at the end. So if you have any burning questions, please, do shout them out. If not, please hold them until the end, and I'll take them then. So I'm Paul Empringham. I'm the European Sales Director for Team EDA. I've been with the company for just under 2 years now. My background is firmly within CAD, PLM management. So I spent 5 years at Siemens PLM as a business consultant, spent lots of fantastic years around aerospace, automotive, Formula One teams all around the UK. Then as part of that, I've spent PLM management roles and CAD management roles within the electronics industry and within the UK defence industry as well. Through that time, I've met so many different people within the industry, all over the world. And I also spent some time as a VP of research at a PLM media company. So we did conferences and kind of an online offering as well. So you can see me at the bottom there, adjudicating a discussion between all the big vendors, people like SAP, Dassault Systèmes, Siemens, Arras, Oracle. So yeah, I'd like to think that I've got a reasonable overview of the software, all the different licenses, and please feel free to get in touch with me anytime just to talk anything about licensing. So Team EDA, well, the name really gives this away that we actually grew up in the EDA industry, so electronics design automation. We were founded in 2004 by Guy Haas, a marine aviator, a veteran, obviously, of that time. And over the years, using his experience of lots of electronics and semiconductor industries, he started this company, Team EDA, to find a solution for managing licenses. So although we have a fantastic history with lots of US-based companies, certainly across the semiconductor market, you can see we've got so many different companies across these different industry verticals. So we've got industrial manufacturing, aerospace, automotive, defense, architecture, engineering, construction. We service just about every industry. And that's because the software that they have runs on a kind of a port-at-host FlexLM tool. So let's just talk a little bit about our solution then. So our solution is License Asset Manager with usage monitoring. We call it Lamum or LAMUM. And what we provide is a comprehensive integrated solution for license management. I'd like to describe our software as two halves. We have a first half, which is a software asset management tool. So this is where we can store all the information about the vendors, the different software, the licenses, the purchase information. So you might store POs, and really giving you a fantastic view for when your renewal discussion should start next. The second half is usage monitoring, and this is one of the most important parts for the majority of our customers. So this is really looking at the usage of these licenses, floating, network, whatever you want to call them, that sits across all the different users. So we have a FlexLM daemon management desk. We have a whole host of literally hundreds of different reports. We've got alerts. We can use some of these reports for chargebacks. So that's where you may want to charge back certain software costs to different departments or even individual users. And the idea with all of this is with the SAM tool and all this usage monitoring is we're performing that kind of holistic view that data-driven view for decision-making support. So you may be coming up for a software renewal. You need to have a good view as to your software trends and strategy and how you can go ahead and optimize your licenses, because we're very confident that you can actually go ahead and make some big savings. It's probable that you're not going to be using all of your licenses, so you may be able to cash those in, trade them, not pay maintenance, and make some pretty hefty savings. So engineering licenses, what are we talking about here? Originally, when we started out as a company, we were looking at EDA type tools or kind of ECAD, PCB, and these are, you can see in the top left-hand corner, with the most popular ones like Mentor Graphics, now known as Siemens EDA, Cadence, Zuken, Synopsys, Altium. It's just a selection of them. There's obviously a whole host out there. But of course, this is also relevant for other tools protected by this FlexNet or FlexLM, as most people know it, software. So it's relevant to CAD tools. So in the bottom left, we see some of the most popular ones, such as SolidWorks, Inventor, AutoCAD. Some of the bigger ones, such as Siemens NX and CATIA, those are high value, and PTC Creo. Simulation, again, these are very high value software tools, just for what they provide to R&D teams. So ANSYS, COMSOL, Altair, MSC, the list goes on. And we also see a lot of our customers, if you're using some of those, then you're almost definitely using some kind of mathematics based tool as well. So MATLAB from MathWorks is an incredibly popular tool out there. So these are just some of the examples, but there are literally hundreds of products out there which we support because they are looked after by a port-at-host style flexible network licensing. So when we look at network licenses, what do I actually mean? Well, typically we have a license server and we have a number of clients that sit on the left-hand side. And when somebody loads up a program, they request a license. So that is a checkout license request. That request goes in, it comes to this vendor daemon. The vendor daemon looks at the license file to see how many licenses are available. And if there are some available in the pool, a successful checkout occurs and this person can use the software. That's in its simplicity. And when they're finished using it, the license gets checked back in to the license pool over here. Now, our server, the Lamum server, sits as a separate entity, although you can install it on this license server. And this license server can serve many of these different license servers, license daemons, but you just need one Lamum server. And what we do is we keep a constant view then of what licenses are checked in, checked out, what's available in the license pool. And we also have access to this debug log file as well, just to kind of validate everything, so any license denials. We also have a look at the options file as well, and we'll discuss that as we go through. On the right-hand side here, we can see FlexLM or FlexNet, as it's now known, is probably the most commonly used license protection for engineering software, but we also support a whole host of other port-at-host style license protection systems. Sentinel, RMS, and HASP are very common ones. So Dassault System have their own proprietary system, which is LUM and DSLS, and the list goes on. So let's talk a little bit about checkout abuse. What exactly is it that we mean? Well, I'm defining this as simply holding on to a network or a flexible license for longer than is necessary to perform a task. Therefore, denying other users that license when it should really have been returned back to the license pool. Now we have to think, why does this happen? So let's just look at some of the reasons then as to why this may actually occur, and why it's a problem as well. So how do users actually keep hold of these licenses? So on this slide, really, we're talking about this happening on purpose. Well, if we look at this, certainly in my time as a CAD and PLM manager, I've seen on several occasions people get into work early. They launch all their applications, So we were using Siemens tools, so they would launch their NX, Team Center, maybe Mentor Graphics, and they would open up some work parts and they would start editing them just to make sure that they pulled the appropriate license. And at that stage, they would head off, get a coffee, or go and stand around the water cooler, catch up with friends, maybe go to the morning meeting. But the point of this is that they would get there early in the morning and pull that license and reserve it for themselves. And this is a problem because typically for companies, they won't be using, they won't have enough licenses for all of their staff. And most of the companies we see, if you have 100 engineers, you probably license for about 60, 65 engineers, because you can be sure that some of them are on holiday, some of them are out on business trips, and a percentage of them just won't be using the tools at that point in time. Obviously, if you have all of your engineers, all 100 engineers coming in the morning and reserving their licenses, then you're going to find that not everybody can actually get a license because you've only got about 65 licenses. So this is where we talk about license ratios and license optimization. Have you ever experienced that? I know I have. Talking to many others, they know that's exactly what happens. So we need to see if we can train that behavior, and we'll talk about how we do that later. Now, we have come across on a couple of occasions some people who are really crafty, and it's about running scripts to keep their sessions alive. So some software applications will actually pull a license back automatically. We'll talk about that again later. But they actually have got a script that kind of pings or keeps their license application alive, so their license never get returned. Now that is very devious, I would say. Doesn't happen very often, but using our tool, our solution, you'll find you should be able to see exactly which people are doing, and that kind of helps you track down what's happening. But rather than doing things on purpose and hoarding licenses, this can happen by mistake as well. So how do users keep their licenses by mistake? Well, certainly during COVID, this has become more of an issue, more prevalent, and it happened certainly beforehand as well. So you may find that on your desk, you have a high-powered CAD workstation, but actually you're running from a different location. So you're actually maybe away on business, or from a COVID point of view, you're working from home. Rather than pulling huge amounts of data across the network, you can actually remote desktop or similar into your CAD workstation on your desktop back in the office, and that allows you to run some pretty complex solves using the GPUs or the CPUs kind of on those machines, without having to have that throughput at home. Now, what we often find when we first work with a customer is that companies that have that capability, users will simply be remote into the desktop, they'll run to do their CAD work, or they'll run some simulations, and when they're finished, they simply disconnect. Now, disconnecting is not the same as closing down the parts, closing down the application on the remote workstation. So we often see then that people keep these licenses on their remote workstations for 24 hours, 48 hours. They're simply running these licenses all the time, which is not very good for license optimization. And it's also becoming more prevalent also with cloud hosting, remote VPU workstations that sit across the cloud via Microsoft Azure or Amazon AWS. More and more people are logging into remote workstations to run kind of compute and high vGPU type processes. So this can happen by mistake, and we'll look at this as well. Another one also is simply running licenses on multiple workstations. And how can this happen? Well, quite often I've seen it happen so many times. Is you have your engineers sat out in the offices, but they come in to do a design review in the conference room. log in. Let's log into SolidWorks. They show off their designs, take some feedback. One of the managers there says, right, come on, we need to make those changes right away. We've got a deadline. So the engineer goes scurrying out to make the changes, but he forgets to log out here, and he's ultimately consuming a license on the conference room computer and the computer back at his desktop, which is not a good situation to have. We also see commonly in labs as well, so electrical labs, all manner of different things. You might have a PC or two where you're doing some testing. So again, the engineer might log into this computer and pull up SolidWorks or Cadence or some kind of electrical software, the same software he has running on his desktop back in his office. And of course, he's consuming two sets of licenses, when what he should have done is close down the tool on his office. So he's then only consuming one license per person. So why does this matter? Well, users hoarding licenses, either actively or by mistake, the bottom line is it's costing your company money. You're burning money on licenses which you shouldn't need to. If they're not fully utilized, then you're spending more money than you should be. I mean, less licenses in the license pool is obviously forcing the company to make investment into unnecessary additional licenses. No one wants that. I've certainly been in situations where chief engineers or management staff have come along, bang their fists on the table. Right, we need more licenses. We can't have people having these license denials. And it's only when you can prove and show them the information as to why the majority of the time people aren't using the full licenses, and that maybe we could change our working practices a little more. When you can show that evidence about what can be saved, then the management actually pat you on the back and think, well, no, this is good because we don't need to spend that money. All the savings can be made. So it directly affects department budgets and ultimately the profitability of your business as well. So it is critical as to what we do. Well, how can LAMUM, how can it actually assist us with this checkout abuse? So, I mean, it sounds simple, doesn't it? But we really do need to know what we own and who's using it and where it's being used. Now, so many companies we come across, they think they've got a good handle on what's being used where and when and by who. But actually, until you can see the data, it always surprises people. Every time we run a trial, people can see their own data. One of the first questions is, "Oh, why is Harry using that? He shouldn't be using that license." Or, "Well, hold on, we've got a couple of guys from India using these licenses, and that shouldn't be right. We're not compliant with our license if they're using them. How's that happened?" So, that fundamentally, by seeing what's being used by who and where, helps you immediately start checking out these the license abuse. We can start looking at current checkout duration, so we can have a complete live picture as to who's using what and how long they've had it open. Going to talk about options files in a moment because that's one of the key aspects. Historical reports, well, we have a whole host of them, and it's certainly some of these reports are reports that you can't often get when you're using your own in-house kind of LM stat tools. So you might be running some in-house tools and reports, but unless you're recording all this data, you just probably don't have this historical view and the way that we can present it. So we'll run through some of these in a demonstration. We also have a remove capability that allows us to recycle and revoke licenses. We have the capability to provide a live view for all users of the users that are using the tools. So it might be some hotly contested license modules. Well, if you allow users to look at that list, they can start self-administering, and they might not have to get in touch with the administration staff. And we've got a whole host of different alerts, but here I've picked out the long checkout alert, license availability, and the duplicate license checkout. And I'll run through these in a demonstration in a moment. So I just wanted to talk about options files. We saw earlier that every license daemon, if it's FlexLM based, has the ability to run an options file. And an options file is a text-based file that basically sets out the rules for how the license daemon runs. Most people use it for entitlement, so that's where you can select a group of users and you can either provide or restrict licenses to them. But one of the features which I guess the power users use, but it's probably not used very often, is something called timeout. Now in this example on screen, you can see we're looking at Cadence, the Cadence License Manager, and what they're looking for is the ability to time out or recall licenses when they're idle. And step one is to create a file called options.opt. Within here, you simply type in timeout, and on this occasion they're doing timeout all. So that's going to time out all licenses. So after a period of time, so 3,600 seconds, it will look to revoke or pull back those licenses. You can also, rather than doing timeout all, you can do timeout per license feature. And there's plenty of support on the internet out there for this as well. So have a look about options files and timeout. Now on the left-hand side here, I just want to point out that timeout doesn't work for all vendors. So in this example, so MathWorks with their MATLAB, they have a minimum timeout period of 4 hours before the licenses get revoked. Whereas Autodesk, with things like AutoCAD, their minimum is only 15 minutes. And Siemens products, so things like NX, Mentor Graphics, I'm told that they don't support it whatsoever. So it's a bit of a mixed bag out there, but options files is a method for you to enforce the revoking and recalling of licenses when they're idle, and that is a FlexLM daemon feature. Remember, I mentioned that we, with our product, we look after things like DSLS, LUM, Sentinel HASP, Sentinel RMS. So not all of those will have this kind of same feature. What we're talking about here is a FlexLM FlexNet only feature. Okay, so let's jump to a demo then. So what we're looking at here is our front end to Lamum. And so this is a web front end that allows your administrator or management team to log in. We do also have a second method of being able to enter the software, which we will come on to. That's a slightly different port number. So as we log in, okay, sorry, I'm in the UK and I'm running this from a server in the US, so apologies for any slight delay there. So when we get to this first line, we've got the ability to look at the SAM tool, or the License Asset Manager, LAM. Within LAM then, if we look at the licenses, so this is where we can store all the license information and configuration about our vendors and the licenses. So you can see here we've got a slightly overwhelming list of different software that we have. Because it's an asset management tool, although we don't track Adobe licenses because these are maybe on a subscription basis, there's no reason we can't store them in here. So we can say, yeah, we've got Adobe Illustrator, it was purchased under this purchase order, we've got 5 of them, and it's kind of cloud hosted, and so on, and maybe who's responsible for it. But we can actually filter this list down to who's actually been responsible for this. Okay. So let me just look at the vendors then. So from the vendors, list. So this is where we might store everything about our vendors. We can look at cadence. So I'm just giving you a quick overview of the LAM tool before we move on to some of the other aspects. So in here, this is where we can see maybe some contract information, an NDA, perpetual subscription license agreements, some information about corporate agreements, who that was agreed with, and kind of linking out to the intranet as to where these files are, who the vendor is. Certainly I found that our salesmen and kind of support reps changed all the time. So it's good just to have one location centrally for all your team to know who these people are, who the latest person is, what their phone numbers and contact details are. And then underneath we can store all the information about, what we have. If you want to, all the purchase orders that define the agreements, how it's licensed, is it a subscription, is it perpetual with maintenance, and maybe the costs for each of those. We also might want to look at geographic locations as well for each of these. So quite often you might have a license agreement that restricts where you're allowed to use these licenses. So we can store that as well. So we can say whether it is a LAM license. So let's just go back here. So a geographic restriction. So you might say this is kind of a LAN based in San Diego. You might have paid extra and it's kind of a WAN, wide area network, or kind of a follow the sun style license. So yeah, geographic restrictions as well. But we also then have something called a license, FlexLM license daemon. So at this stage, this is where we can, if you're used to FlexLM, you can do the start, stop, and reread of licenses. Rather than having to log into each of the different servers, we can actually do that from this one dashboard, which is a huge time saver for the administrators. We can also, for each of these, we can pull out the license files. So we could go in and edit the license files, add lines, and make that man readable, just so it's a nice, quick and easy way of seeing how many licenses we have on the previous license and how many licenses we have now. We were talking about the options files. So if you do have options files or work with them and you want to set out that timeout setting, you can do that within here, and we can actually open it, modify it, and we have some syntax checking as well, because it can be particularly sensitive to the incorrect syntax. And we can pull the debug file as well. So within this tool, we can set up a number of different reports about all the different licenses. We could set up who the different users are. You might have a number of different SAM managers, depending on the size of the company, who need access to these purchase orders and so on. But what we're going to do is move on to the usage tab. And the usage tab actually opens up a subset of functionality. We're moving from, this is the SAM tool, and we're now moving into the usage monitoring tool. So the first view that we look at then is kind of a dashboard that shows us a number of different things. We have all the different license servers that we have configured. So in this example, we have MATLAB, and that's set. Maybe we've got 3 sets of MATLAB servers. Now you might wonder why we have 3. That's maybe one in the US, maybe one in Europe, maybe one in India. And again, we've got 2 sets of Siemens NX license servers. So again, maybe one in the US, one in Europe. These are all FlexLM, and we have AccuRev, which is an RLM protected tool. So we can see these all up and running. Back up at the daemon manager, we saw that we had one which wasn't running, which was I think it was a cadence one. So we can see these ones we're actively monitoring and have configured. We have all the real-time data, which we'll move on to in a moment, and we've got all the historical data across on the right-hand side. So yeah, there that's just showing that the cadence one is configured, but it's not running at the moment. So let's talk a little bit about having an overview as to what's being used. I mentioned previously that the biggest thing is understanding what licenses you've got and how they're being used and where they're being used. So we can see at this stage, we've got our different servers. So we can see all of our MATLAB, well, 75% of our MATLAB licenses are in use on this server. So we've got these nice kind of views here. AccuRev, we can see, is at 100%. So we have 6 licenses and all 6 are in use. That could cause us problems. And again, with these Siemens licenses, we have 15 licenses and all 15 in use as well. So looking at these, this might point to, well, have we got some people hoarding licenses? You know, we're running at capacity here. That's obviously going to create problems. Let's investigate a little bit further here. We can also look at this gas gauge view. So this is the same view, but a slightly different visualization of it. This can be stored as a URL. So we can effectively take a URL like this, copy this and send this to other people. It's quite good for having up on a screen in an operations room, an IT operations room, or on your intranet as well. It's a great visual cue to see how we are. And this updates and refreshes all the time. So we could go in here and we might just have a look then, who's using all these licenses? So we click in, we can see we've got 15 licenses all in use. These are the 15 people. Okay, let's have a look at checkout. So we can see when they check them out. So remember I told you that we typically see people, or I have done, people zoom in the morning, super early, check out all their licenses for all their different programs and just have it sitting in the background. Well, we can see what time they took this license out. We can also, if we click on this header here, and see how long these people have had the licenses open for. Okay, well, this guy's had it open for 2 hours, and we can see scrolling down that people have had it for a lot lower. We quite often, when we work with companies, we quite often see then that the total time in use, we get some people where it is 48 hours. And that's an indicator that they're using kind of a remote desktop style license system. And that they are maybe the first people that you should go to discuss checking back in their work, checking back in their licenses. Because if they're hoarding a license for 48 hours, it means they're probably not using it all the time, and they could actually hand it back to a number of the other users. And then you wouldn't be running at 15, at 100% capacity. So yep, we can see the workstations that they're working on. We can see whether they've borrowed licenses. So that might be if they've checked a license out, if the FlexLM allows license borrowing. And we also have this capability for look for queued licenses. So some of the EDA software out there has the capability to show if you're queuing for a license as well. With Siemens, we don't have that at this stage. Now, the key thing I wanted to show you here was this remove button. If you found that somebody had gone on holiday, maybe this said that it's 72 hours the license has been out for. You make some inquiries and you discover that this person is on holiday, but he's left his remote workstation alive and running. You may want to click on remove, and the remove capability will force a revoke using the lm remove command. Okay, just returning back to the home area. So that's a little bit about the real time, which is all about showing you who's using what and where. We can start looking at some of the historical graphs as well. So let's look at the graphs. So we can see the whole license history. So these are the different features on the licenses. So we have a number of different modules. We also have, NX has this a bundle, and underneath that it has a number of bundled features. So typically we just look at how many bundles are in use, but if you're doing some license optimization, you might look at some of these features underneath to discover how many they're using. Because if they're only using a certain subset, maybe you want to downgrade or trade into a lower level bundle. Talk to us about that, because it can be quite complicated. So when we look at this shows us the history. So I'm just looking at a 7-day chart for our users. So we can see the dashed line shows us the top level capacity. We kind of have this trend line that shows us the average. And if we did this over let's say a 90-day period, we'd want to see that we're working. Okay, so our trend line in the middle here is pretty normal, pretty average, but obviously if it's heading up to the right, then it's going to indicate that we might need more licenses. And it can get a bit busy if you're looking at 90 days. So one of the things we can do is we can turn on this thing called scale graph that allows us just simply to drag in this ability to kind of zoom in on certain functions so we can see what's happening at these stages. All of these are available as images. We can also create a batch command so we can actually get these via email as well. Now, I just wanted to highlight your attention to this pie chart down the bottom here. So this is about checkout duration for this license feature, which is a Mach 3 from NX. Now, it's at this stage also that we can see who has had the software open for the longest. Now, we can see these are all actually pretty equal, but typically in our customers, we find that for certain features, there'll be 2 or 3 people that have it out for substantially longer than maybe the other people. So this is a great tool to go in and understand at a license feature level if there's anybody hoarding licenses. So yep, you can do that across many of those different license features. The user report as well. So let's just have a look at the user report. We'll see that the usual suspects here. So again, this is a report. Let's just look at the last 7 days. And we can do total usage just by toggling on this top level of the chart. So we can see that this guy here had it open for 96 hours. Again, if you've got a high usage period, but maybe a low checkout period, this again is a good indicator that somebody's hoarding licenses, and they shouldn't be. But at this stage here, maybe you want to do some chargeback, so we can see maybe this license file costs us $80,000 a year to maintain. You may laugh, but actually that does happen. I know of several licenses out there that cost a huge amount for maintenance every year, and sometimes a department will actually charge the value of that back to a specific department or a specific user. So we can do that. So we could say, yep, this is, if I put numlock on, I can type. So we can then see, yep, the cost is $80,000, and then this is the breakdown per user of each of these. Okay, just going back to this home tab. So we can do reports across groups. I just wanted to show you heat map as well. So this is looking at where we see the distribution of checkouts as well. So, I mean, it's always interesting to me. I've been in these situations where, we look across and we see, okay, well, at 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning, why is there no one on the system? And again, at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. Whereas we're seeing some peak times, we're seeing a lot of people on the system first thing in the morning. Are these people that are coming in and hoarding licenses? Why have we got kind of the most distribution here as well at 1 o'clock, or maybe at Monday at 5 o'clock, or 4:30? Typically, where you see the red peaks, we often find that these are just before design review meetings, where people are going in to maybe release all their work prior to a design review. And where we're seeing these kind of blue sections, it might be because there's meetings that a lot of the designers or engineers are needed to attend. Now, showing this kind of picture to R&D or engineering leaders can actually help in change the distribution of work. It can actually lead people to say, well, do we need all these people in the meetings at this time? Maybe not. So you can work with your management teams to get a better distribution of when people are using the tools, and that should go ahead and stop hoarding some of the licenses as well. Concurrency is a really interesting one. So let's just change from 24/7 to Monday to Friday 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. because that's a bit more realistic. So we've got a nice equal distribution here. So just over 5% of the time, just under 6% of the time, all 15 licenses are in use. But actually, 2 licenses are in use, just under 10% of the time. This is nice and equal. What we do tend to see with some customers is it might be a bit flat, but some near the top kind of third of the licenses, sometimes it can tail off. And sometimes, most of the licenses just simply aren't in use. Maybe the top 10% of licenses have never been used within 7 days. If you did 180 days and you found that the top 10% of licenses have never been used, you have to question whether you need those licenses or whether you could be optimizing them. Denials. Okay, denials. I'm just going to head up to the denials over here. So each of these tabs actually contain more detailed information, more detailed reports. This is a dashboard for the most straightforward reports, the ones that we use the most, but we have some very, very detailed reports that come out here. So I'm just going to do a denial overview. This shows me the denials against every kind of software, so both MATLAB and the Siemens NX. We don't have any for the EcuRev. And if I go into table, I can then see, right, in May we had 10 denials, or we had 3 on this day, or we could go ahead and work out why we had those denials. Now, again, this is all part of that holistic view as to understanding when you get denials and when you don't. If people are hoarding licenses, then typically you're going to get denials. Or if you've never seen any denials, you've probably got too many licenses. There is a balance point somewhere with reducing the number of licenses and then seeing how many denials you get. Denials aren't all bad. The average report, this is a really important one, and I will show you why. So over the last 7 days, we've discovered then that using this NX module, the total usage is this amount, but the average time is an hour. Now, this can get skewed quite easily if you have people using logging into remote desktops and so on. So you need to work on this figure here. Maybe that can be reduced. But let's say that most people open a CAD file, do some work, save it, close it, and they've used that license for an hour. Well, we have a fantastic capability called the long checkout alert. And the long checkout alert will allow us to combine an alert with that average use that we see there. So we might have a look at this. So using NX, we can say, let's choose this license feature. Or we can say, well, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. Let's say if after 3 hours they've still got it open, then maybe you'll email an admin, maybe you won't. But if you've got Active Directory set up, you can send a warning message to the user as well. So it's just an active message that tells people, hold on, you've used this license longer than we expect. And I want you to review whether you're still using it. If you're not, check it back in so other people can use it. So this is part of our active license checkout abuse functionality. The other one I was going to look at was this duplicate license checkouts alert. So this one is, again, you might say if someone is using this license in a conference room and they're using it at their desk, we'll get a report on that. So it can be quite good for an admin to have these reports quite often, because you then begin to see who the usual suspects are. But you can see here we've got a number of different alerts. So if we're getting near capacity, how many denials we get. This available license alert is a good one as well, because if it's a hotly contested license, you might want your engineers to look at these licenses and just see to have an email letting them know when it's available. And on that, let's just have a look at this second view. So we have a second capability of logging in, this port 8182. So this URL can be shared with anybody in the company and they don't need to log in as we did do previously. And what it allows people to do, maybe we want to have a look at the details of, Yeah, okay, let me just show you from a gas gauge point of view. So we might say from a MATLAB, we might want to share this view using this URL to show how, we've got 20 licenses, 17 in use, 3 available. You could share this via some intranet or some dashboard, and that would allow your engineers to maybe self-administer. They'd be able to go in and they'd be able to see, well, hold on, Richard Evans has actually been using it for an hour and 44 minutes. Not happy with that. So they can actually give them a call and they can self-administer rather than getting in touch. So again, this is a really powerful way of stopping checkout abuse. Your users won't be able to remove people. Don't you worry, that can only be done at admin level. So we've seen a lot of options there. So just running back through, reinforcing what we've seen there is, we can look and see a current view as to who's got entities checked out. We can look at this gas gauge view as well to drill into knowing who is using what, where, and when. We have this remove feature that allows us to force a removal and stop people hoarding. We literally have hundreds of historical reports that show us who's using entities, where, and when. So we saw this historical graph. I pointed out the top 10 to look at this checkout duration because this is going to show up if people are actually abusing checkouts. We looked at heat maps. So not only do we have heat maps for usage, we also have denial heat maps as well. There we go. So again, this can show key times when we're getting denials throughout the day. We talked a little bit about concurrent usage as well. If it shows this distribution, maybe we've got too many licenses. We looked at the users because we can then see the total usage as well. We can do that against groups. And we looked a little bit about the automated alerts as well. As ever, there's a whole host more. This is how we maybe want to set up an intranet page with a number of URLs that kind of take us through to certain different informations there. Now, just coming towards the end of this before we take questions, data accuracy is something that we take incredibly seriously. Now, we find lots of companies use in-house scripts, and then they try and put those together to kind of strategically look at whether they're increasing or decreasing. Now, we've seen some of these scripts overstating usage by as much as 150%, which is horrifying, isn't it, really? So we actually take these licenses, we double check against all the log files with our own algorithms just so we are 100% accurate. So, as a summary, we have a load of comprehensive tools here to start looking at how we can move away from this checkout abuse, how we can spot it, how we can actively manage, and areas that you can work with your users on. And all of that is really through an asset management tool, looking at the usage reporting. We've got all these kind of on-demand reports. It's easy to create the batch reports as well. And we've got numerous alerts that sit within this tool. Just like to highlight that Lamum is super easy to implement. Most of our customers we have up and running with 2 or 3 FlexLem daemons within an hour. It only takes less than 15 minutes to upgrade. It's all kind of one click. Should you need it, we can help you with the installs, but I have to say most people don't really need that assistance. But we're always on hand with our support team and our fantastic website to provide assistance further. So the value proposition for Lamum is, realistically using all these tools, not only can we help you with your stopping checkout abuse, but we can also help you save about 20% on your licenses, your license maintenance every year, which is a huge payback. Our customers love it. Just look at some of the testimonials on our website. And we get that 20% through accurately knowing, what you use, where and when. It gives you that holistic view to a data-driven view to be able to negotiate with the vendors. Quite often people use the reports from our tool to show that they're just not using all the licenses. And then the vendors haven't really got anywhere to hide. So that's when they start negotiations. Yep, so looking at trends, zero usage I didn't show you in this demo, but certainly get in touch and we can show all this further. Now at this point, are there any questions that people have about what I've shown? Okay. So without any questions at this stage, I'd just like to highlight, this was a specific webinar talking about how to stop people hoarding their licenses and the different functionality we have to be able to identify that and how to stop that as a problem. I'd encourage you to go and download the white paper. So we have a white paper here about prevention of engineering checkout abuse that covers the majority of the points that we've covered in this webinar. So please go to that. But without further ado, I'd just like to say thank you for your time. Much appreciated. If you have any questions, please do get in touch via phone or email. I'm based in Europe. We have sales agents in India. Please look at our website for their details. We have partner organizations all around the world. So again, look at our website, look at the partner information. There will be somebody in your region that you can contact. If not, please contact me or the US and we will point you in the right direction. I really hope that you can look at this, even if you just wanted to run a 30-day trial to help you identify whether you have people abusing checkouts. Get in touch and we can work with you from there. So thank you.